Hi, my name is Kerry Critchlow from RCR Recording Studios, and today we are going to be going over how to actually put everything that we've gone over in this series into actual use. So for some of you, if you've been following along with this series, a lot of this is probably going to be kind of like review. These should be familiar concepts to you at this point. But we're going to take all the concepts we've gone over to and try to utilize them to actually make music. And I'm going to do my best to run you through that process, or at least the process I use, in hopes that this is going to be useful to you and your own production, songwriting endeavors. So to start with, I think if you've been following the series, you've seen this before, how to write/produce a song. And the first step, excuse me. The first step is to find your inspiration. And this can be anything. It's not limited to this list, but these are just a few simple things that I've written down. So your inspiration could be a chord progression that you like. Maybe you have some lyrics that you want to, put some music around. It could be a sound. It can be a drum beat. It can be a loop, a musical loop of some sort. It can be themes from like a movie, a book, a poem, media, or something maybe that you've heard that you like that you kind of want to try to emulate from this kind of stuff. It can be a melody you hear in your head, and it can be so many other things. But the idea is you need to find something that is going to inspire you to to lay down the first, sound, whether that's, a kick drum, a hi-hat, a bass line, whatever it is, a guitar, a piano. Just find your inspiration. Find that thing that's going to like get you excited to start your song. And then once you've found that inspiration, you can start laying down the basic foundation, right? And that's going to be, if it's, for instance, if it's a sound that you like, maybe you start laying down the first couple of notes of that sound and start building from there. If it's a drum beat, then you lay down maybe a drum loop, and then you start building from there. If it's a melody, you put down the melody that you like, and then you go from there, right? So you start with your inspiration, and then you're just laying down the first few notes, right? Whatever that is, you're just starting to kind of not randomly, but you're starting to sort of put things together. You're putting down the first few notes and building off from that foundation. Then once you've got a firm foundation, you can start putting in the template. So maybe you can say, I have a foundation of a verse or a chorus that I like, but now I need to add the other sections of the song if you want them. I mean, some songs are just a verse chorus. Some are going to be more complicated. But you have different types of songs that exist out there. Do you want to start with the chorus first? Do you want to start with the verse first? How many verses? How many choruses? Do you want a bridge? Is there going to be a pre-chorus? There's a lot of variation that can come in this stage. There's no real hard, fast rule, but you can start sort of just putting together like the template or the sort of the framing of your song, so to speak. Then once you've got the basic foundation and the template put together, then you can go in and start filling in the details. Maybe this is adding drum fills to your drums, or putting in extra instruments, or working on arrangement things. This section may or may not include lyrics if your lyrics weren't kind of one of the inspirational things in the first place. This might be the spot where you start putting down your lyrics, or writing your lyrics to what you have currently. So filling in the details. This can be ear candy stuff. This can be all the things that sort of like come together, all the little details that make your song feel more interesting and make it come to life. And then throughout the entire process of writing your song, this isn't just, I have it down here at step 5, but really this is going on the entire way through this process, is that you're doing a plan, do, check, and adjust. You're making a plan to, put drums in this section, and then you put the drums in this section, and then you check, do I like the drums in this section? And if you do, you keep it, and if not, you adjust it, you change it, right? And I call this the PDCA process, plan, do, check, and adjust. Also, I've mentioned, I've also said, this is my personal philosophy when it comes to music, but I'm constantly asking myself this question. does this sound good to me? If it sounds good to me, then it's good. And if not, then I need to change something, right? So I'm applying this kind of principle throughout the entirety of this process, right? The entire time. So like I know I have it down here, but like this is kind of like all encompassing. And then once everything sounds good and you feel like your song is done, then it's done. All right. And so I know I make this sound very simple, and in large part because to me personally, I do find this kind of simple in a very real sense. Especially considering the fact that I've made, you know, hundreds of songs, hundreds and hundreds of songs in my life, and I've worked with hundreds of other songs with people that have come through my studio, and so this is a very familiar process to me. And once you familiarize yourself with this process, it's actually pretty staggering how quickly you can start putting music together really quickly using this kind of formula here, or like, this process, if you will. So anyways, let's sort of dive into this a little bit. And as we're going, we're also going to be referring to concepts that we've covered in the videos. For instance, things like theory, music theory. Now, I need to state this again, just in case you haven't seen my previous theory videos, but there are things that music theory can do and things that it cannot do. And one of the things music theory cannot do is write a song. Essentially, what music theory is doing is describing what is actually happening in the music. It's not telling you how to write the music. Not in and of itself. There's another step there that needs to be taken. You cannot use music theory to just make music in and of itself. The way I kind of think of it is like music theory is describing the quote unquote laws of music, like gravity describes the laws of physics. Having an understanding of gravity, can help you understand that if you jump off a cliff, you're going to fall, but you don't actually need to know gravity and all its intricate laws in order to know that if you jump off a cliff, you're going to fall, right? So, and another way you might think of it is just as a communication tool. For instance, if you were going to travel to a foreign country, in order to communicate with the people that live in that foreign country, you need to learn their language. Well, music theory is sort of a language of musicians, and it just helps communicate ideas. So, for instance, if I'm talking with another musician and I say, what I'd like you to do is play an A chord, well, what I'm telling them is I want them to play the notes A, C sharp, and E, all together, stacked on top of each other. Or I might say, I want to play in the key of A 1, 4, 5, which means I'm asking that person to play an A, a D, and an E. And then we can also get into the rhythmic aspects of it as well. Sorry if my vocal kind of disappeared there for a second. I really need to clean out my pots. Anyways, so while music theory can be a handy tool and give you some insight into what's going on in your music, it cannot in and of itself write the song for you, but you can use some of these concepts to get you headed in the right direction, right? So one exercise that you may want to try if you're just trying to put together some chords and a melody is pick, 2, 3, 4, 5, however many you want, but pick random numbers here. Like these are the chord degrees up here in this row. They're Roman numerals that give the 8 notes of any given scale, or 7 really technically. You have the octave, oct for 8, and that's just an octave. So the octave of A is A, just pitched higher. But you can take these random Roman numerals, and the uppercase Roman numerals indicate that it is a major chord. The lowercase Roman numerals indicate that it's a minor chord. And then you can put them together in an order. So, for instance, maybe what I want to do is try out the chord progression 4, 6, 5, 1, kind of randomly, right? And if we were to bring up our piano here. As soon as I re-engage my MIDI controller. We're going to load in the piano. We'll bring up our piano roll view here so that we can write in our MIDI notes. And for right now, we're just going to do basic whole notes, which means that if you're counting 1, 2, 3, 4, as we've gone over in previous videos, a whole note is going to last for all 4 of those counts. And if we are doing, what did I say? 4, 4, 6, 5, 1. So a 4 in the key of A is a D. And if we want to figure out what notes make up the chord D, we can write in a very fun little thing with using this formula here is if we start on D and we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, this will give our D major triad because this is a major chord. We have the D, our third is an F sharp, and our fifth is an A. So the chords that make up a D are D, F sharp, and A. And so we'll go ahead and put in those notes. All right, so we have a D, an F sharp, and an A. And then we can get rid of these for now. And then we want to figure out the 6th, which is an F sharp minor in the key of A. And so we can do that same thing. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And in order to get an F sharp minor chord, we can take the 1, the 3, and the 5, and it's an F sharp, an A, and a C sharp. Excuse me. And so our next chord is going to be an F sharp, an A, and a C sharp. And then we want our 5. So we're going to do this process again. And we'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, starting on the E. And then our notes right here, this row here, we have an E, a G sharp, and a B, our 1, our 3, and our 5. So E, G sharp, and B. Now, once you start to kind of, if you do this enough times, eventually you'll be able to start kind of memorizing what some of these chords are. I'm only doing this so that you can kind of see an example of how this whole thing comes together. And if you want more details into how this all comes together using the whole scale formula and all of this kind of stuff, you can watch my previous video on music theory. We're not going to be going over all of the aspects of that video, but we are kind of utilizing the principles we learned because I said how I said that I would tie all of this stuff in, and this is one way that you can tie it in, right? So once you understand how this is all put together, you can start figuring out not only the chords that belong in a key, but you can also figure out what notes make up those chords, and you can kind of understand the scale degree. Now, the scale degree is not the same thing as what I'm doing right now. For instance, there are, when it comes to triads, there are formulas, and I think I've went over this in the video when I went over this. But when it comes to triads, there are formulas for that. So a major chord is going to be made up of the triad a 1, a 3, and a 5. That is not the same thing we're doing here when we're figuring out these notes. This is just a kind of a cheaty, tricky way to figure out the notes that belong in each chord by doing this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then using the 1, 3, 5. But that is not the same thing as these triad formulas. For instance, if you were to look into how, for instance, if you wanted to take an A major, which is an, because we have it written out here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here, an A major would be an A, a C sharp, and an E. Well, that is a major, so it is the third is a major. If we want it to be minor, we have to flat this third, in which case we take this C sharp and we make it a C. And so an A minor is actually an A, a C, and an E. I don't want you to be confused, and hopefully I'm not confusing you now, but I don't want you to confuse these formulas down here with what we're doing up here to figure out what notes are going into these chords. Similarly, this B minor, if we do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down here, and we find out that in a B minor chord you have a B, a D, and an F sharp. Well, we know that this is a B minor, so if we actually want this to be a B major, we need to sharp the D, or take off the flat of this minor chord. So this would actually be a D sharp. So a B, a D sharp, and an F sharp would make up a B major. But since we're trying to figure out what's in a B minor chord, this 1, 3, and 5 will tell us exactly what notes are in this chord. So hopefully that's going to be, hopefully that's not confusing you too much. But anyways, where were we at here? So we have the D, so the 4, the 6, the 5, and then the 1, I think I said, right? 4, 5, 6, 1. So A, this is already kind of, because it's already written out, 1, 3, 5. We've already talked about this. It's A, C sharp, and E. And so we will draw in our A, our C sharp, and our E. And this is just an arbitrary chord progression that I came up with. I just picked 4 numbers here and then put them together. And then we can just repeat that over and over and over again. So we can just have, copy and paste this out as much as we want. But this can be a potential chord progression. We'll listen back, and if I like it, I may use it. And if I don't like it, I might choose a different chord progression. So I'm not sure I like this 1 here. So I might change that to something else. So we're doing a 4, 6, 5 here. Maybe a 2 would work here. So the B minor. So 1, oops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And just as we discussed, a B minor will have a B, a D, and an F sharp in it. So we'll try a B, a D, and actually maybe we want to bring this one down a little bit. A B, a D, and an F sharp in it. Not liking that either, personally. If you do, that's great. Go ahead and use it. Now let's try the C sharp. Now again, this is all that plan, do, check, and adjust, or does it sound good to you mentality. I am just trying things out until I find something that I do like. So we'll try the C sharp minor, which will be a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to figure out the notes, which would be a C sharp, an E, and a G sharp. And again, once you start to do this enough times, you won't actually have to go through this process every time. But it can be a useful tool to get you started. But once you do this enough times, you kind of start to memorize some of these chords or what notes make up these chords. So let's see if this is any better. Okay. And I think that is probably going to be our winner. Now, one thing we can do, and I think, again, that I've touched on this in the past, is look at what are called inversions. And this is going to be things that you can use to either make things easier to play or give you different voicings. But essentially what you're doing is you're using all the same notes, but instead of having the bottom note here, for instance, on this D, F sharp, A, the D major chord, instead of having the D on the bottom, you could put the F sharp on the bottom and have the D on the top. And again, for this E major, maybe I want to put the E on the top here. And on this chord, I might actually do a couple of inversions. So we put our C sharp up, and we also put our E up. Now, again, all the same notes. It's just that the notes are now in a different kind of order, right? So this is now a second inversion. This is a first inversion, which means no change happens at all. You have the F sharp, the A, and the C sharp for F sharp minor. So we're just leaving this in its standard way of doing the 1, the 3, and the 5. So first inversion means no change. We've put our D major into second inversion. We've put our E major into second inversion, and we've put our C sharp minor into third inversion. And again, if you've watched previous videos, you'll kind of have a better understanding of what this is talking about. But as you can see, these chords seem much more grouped together than they did before, and they're going to have kind of a different character to them as well. All right. And so that sounds like a fine chord progression. Now we can maybe, depending on what kind of mood or vibe you want to go for, you can start to speed this up or slow it down. I might speed this up a little bit just because I don't tend to often, I don't often do faster songs. So this is going to be just kind of stretching my own creative juices a little bit, so to speak. Flexing my creative muscles, so to speak. So we're going to do a little faster tempo and see what happens. And then we can copy paste this again. And now we have a 4-bar musical loop. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 bars that we're going to loop. Now we can make this arbitrarily a verse or a chorus or whatever, but we're not quite there yet, but we're starting to put something together. We have a chord structure going, and all I've done is sort of randomly picked some numbers here, the chord degree numbers, randomly picked them, and then put them in kind of an arbitrary order, and just played with it until I found something I liked, right? So this is all part of the process. You might love what you come up with on the first go, or you might have to try a few things, but I will tell you that if you use any of these chords, that they're going to sound in place with one another, with the possible exception of this diminished. Diminished are funny animals. They can be very useful, but they're mostly in the key to create tension in a lot of ways. And so if you're brand new at this, I would avoid the 7th degree of whatever key you happen to be working in, whether it's A, B, C, D, whatever. I might avoid the 7th degree when you're first getting started until you kind of start to get a handle on what it's actually doing, because it can maybe sound out of place if you're not careful with it. But if you stick with 1 through 6, and just kind of start mixing them up. And you can go from like a 2 to a 3 to a 2 to a 3 to a 2 to the 3 and just do a two chord progression. You can do a 3 chord progression, a 4 chord progression. You can have every chord be in there, all 6 of them, or even all 7 of them, if you know what you're doing, and kind of just randomize the order. There's no rules here. I'm just trying to give you some basic, fundamental, simple examples here of how you can start using this in your own songwriting. And with that being said, the vast majority of at least popular music or pop music that you've probably heard over the last 30, 40, 50, 60 years tends to often use 3 and 4 chord progressions in order to get their musical, in order to write their songs. And then what they can do is once you hit a verse or a chorus or a bridge or whatever, you can start using a different set of chords in order to add interest as the song is being played. So a verse might be this 4-bar loop played maybe 4 times, and then when you hit the chorus, you choose different chords and then loop those chords. And then when you hit the bridge, you use even different chords and then loop those chords, et cetera, et cetera. So we're just kind of starting off here. We're just using this kind of, a lot of this is just arbitrary, right? Now, once we've got our chord progression, we can go a lot of ways with this. Assuming that, our inspiration, if we come back here, is the chord progression. Well, now maybe we want to have this be not just a piano. Maybe what we want to do is change up the instrument. And so what we can do is bring up a synthesizer. And I'm using this one primarily because I've been using it already. And so you should be at least somewhat familiar with this particular synthesizer. But as we go forward, I might start using different synthesizers just to kind of give you some exposure to some other user interfaces. And okay, let's maybe look at some pads, and we'll just kind of randomly choose a few here, and we'll bring our chord progression down to this new synthesizer sound. And so we just literally dragged the information that was in our piano, and now instead of it being a piano sound, it's going to be whatever this is. And maybe we'll go through a few sounds until something I hear strikes some inspiration in me. Actually, that's not too bad. So maybe we'll stick with that. Kind of got like a warm, fuzzy sort of thing. Kind of thing. And so and then we can either start adding some melodies or other instruments, some rhythmic things. You can go anywhere with this. Generally, what I tend to do is I just as a personal thing of a quirk of mine, I guess, if you will, is I like drums. And so I tend to oftentimes bring my drums in pretty early in the process if I plan on having drums at all, because they kind of help set the vibe for me in a lot of cases. Like if you listen to enough music, you will start to understand that like different genres tend to be kind of like you can figure out what genre of music it is oftentimes just by listening to the drums, whether it's indie, rock, pop, hip hop, etc. And so the drums play a big role in setting, I mean, not just the rhythmic things, but the sounds of the drums can kind of give you the vibe of the song. And so I tend to bring in drums pretty early on in the process. That doesn't mean you have to. It doesn't even mean you need drums in your productions. But for me personally, I just kind of like to start bringing them in relatively early in this process, just to give me a little bit of a clue on the vibe of the song. And so what I'm going to do is just go through a few different drum kits here and see if anything sounds like it might work here. So I feel like it's a little heavy for this particular thing. Not terrible, but a little heavy. I'm just kind of randomly going through these drums. I have no idea. So something like this might be cool. We'll see. Maybe we'll play with it. And if I end up liking it, then we'll keep it. And if not, we can always change it later. Okay, so I'm just going to find a hi-hat sound that I think might be appropriate. And then we'll try an eighth note pattern. Kind of arbitrarily. And we're going to turn down every other hi-hat a little bit. And I'll show you the velocity here. So we kind of randomly turned up. We're just playing a little bit with the velocities here to make it seem a little bit more natural. And every other one is turned down. And that's just going to give this hi-hat a little bit more of a human feel. And I'm just giving this a little bit of a syncopated kind of accent notes, if you will. This is just something I tend to like doing a lot, is adding other sounds in as accents or syncopated rhythms in order to just create a little bit more interest as this is going. This is not, again, something you always have to do necessarily. You can make this as complex or as simple as you want it to be. Maybe this is too basic for you. Maybe this isn't basic, or maybe you need this to be even more basic. This is all kind of down to personal preference. There's really no right or wrong when it comes to this. This is just kind of what I'm feeling in the moment. I'm playing around, I'm vibing, and just seeing what happens here. And this is the process. Don't be afraid to experiment. Play with things. If it sounds good, it's good. If not, change something. None of this, nothing I'm doing here is set in stone. I can always very simply change things very quickly. If I don't like that, it's gone, right? There's nothing that says that has to be there. I just happen to like it there for now. We do want to grab one that has a bit volume to it. With this particular software, and maybe not all MIDI software works like this, but whatever the last note that I did, it's going to take that velocity as the next thing. So if I were to take this note, it'll make this that note. And so it was just kind of quiet. And I think that there was a kick there. Well, that's interesting. It's making these kicks kind of go away. And so what I may need to end up doing is bring up another instance of this software. And this is something that you can do anyways, because oftentimes one drum kit is not going to have all the sounds that you are looking for necessarily. And so something very common is to use multiple drum kits in order to fill out the sound by layering them, or to, you know, maybe you like the hi-hat in one, but the kick, none of the kicks in this other drum kit are doing it for you, and so you can find another thing that has a kick that you like. In this particular case, though, I think, what was this, Hexam? Yeah. In this case, I'm just going to use the same kit because for some reason when these are being played together in the same MIDI map, they are interfering with one another. And this is just my workaround for that. So if I put a kick there, we can hear it. All right. And so I'm just giving some varied kick sounds and different things. These are just, again, you can experiment and play around with this. This is like not set in stone. You may hate what I'm doing here, and that's fine. You might love it, and that's fine too. We're all entitled to our own sort of opinions, and music is very subjective at the end of the day. The only question you should be asking yourself when you're making your music is, do I like this? And if you like it, then it's good. And if you don't like it, then change it. All right. I'm probably going to sound like a broken record by the end of this video, but that really is a lot of music, is just, what do I like? Asking yourself that question over and over again, and using that as your guide, right? Whether or not you think it sounds good. All right. And I think I've also mentioned this on other videos too, but when it comes to snare type sounds, that can include claps, snaps, big banger, whatever. Generally speaking, you cannot go, like, you really cannot go wrong if you are putting the snare sounds on beats 2 and 4 or just on 3. That doesn't mean you can't put them other spots as well, but you cannot go wrong if you put them on 2 and 4 or just 3. All right, and right now I'm putting them on 3, which is giving it kind of a slowed down sort of feel. All right. And then we can do the same thing here and just copy paste. Just make sure I got everything here. Our kick and snare stuff here. All right. And then I might want to come back into this hi-hat and just see if I can find some other fun little syncopated sounds or... And in this case, I actually kind of like the fact that this is getting choked off a little bit by these other MIDI notes that are happening. It's kind of softening this up a little bit in a pleasant way, but it is being interfered with, and I don't know why this happens, but sometimes some MIDI notes will interfere with other ones in this sort of weird way that I don't fully understand, but you know, you work with it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And we're putting these on 2 and 4. If you haven't watched some of these previous videos, we've already gone kind of a bit of a way, but I can sort of just really quickly try and go over this again. When it comes to the rhythmic aspects of MIDI, you can see that there's a 1 here, a 2 here, a 3 here, and a 4 here. Those are the bars, okay? And in 4/4 time, there are 4 quarter notes in every single bar or measure. Bar and measure are the same thing. They are interchangeable terms. And then you have your subdivisions of these quarter notes, right? Or even like, I guess subdivisions of the bars. And those are whole notes, and a whole note would cover the entire bar. A half note would cover half of the bar. A quarter note would cover a quarter of the bar. An eighth note would cover an eighth of the bar, 16th, etc. You know, turtles all the way down. Anyways, the hi-hat pattern here are just eighth notes. So there are 8 of these in every bar. And I'm hopefully you're kind of getting the idea here. And then I'm putting some of these on the, if you were counting out the bar, it'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, 4. And that's a way to kind of keep track of the bar you're on. But if that's how you would count out a quarter note, to count out an eighth note, you would say 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and just kind of so on and so on. So if we were to count out where these are positioned here, these little accented notes, we have 1 and 2 and. So I've got the first one on the 2, the and beat of 2. I've got this on beat 3, or beat 4. Sorry, and then this one is on beat 3, and then this is just kind of copy pasted back there, so you can kind of get an idea of what I'm doing here rhythmically to make all this kind of stuff happen. This sound is on beats 2 and 4, and when we play everything we've got going on together here. All right. And then we can, for now, I feel like that's kind of cool. I'm going for like a little bit of a softer sort of drum sound for this kind of warm, quiet, paddy sort of thing. And we'll probably rename this. So this will be the hi-hat stuff. And this will be, for now, the kick and snare. So that we kind of understand what's going on with everything. And I'm just going to order it in a way that makes sense to me. I would, as you're doing these productions, I would always recommend that you label your tracks as you go so that you know what's doing what. And then I tend to put them in an order that makes sense to me. All right, and so we've got the basics of a song here, right? And we can copy this out a little bit. And maybe we want to start adding a little bit more instrumentation. So, and again, I'm going to stick to stuff you've already seen in this video, just so that it sort of makes sense to you. But in the future, I may start bringing up different synths and things like that in order so that you can just get used to different user interfaces, because a lot of synths are going to work very they all kind of doing the same thing, but maybe the way in which you do it is slightly different as far as menuing, if that makes sense. And so, like, let's maybe find a bass sound, and we're probably looking for something a little bit softer. And if we need to change the sound, or we find something that maybe is close but not quite there, we can always tweak it using our sound design. Let's turn this down. That's way too heavy for what we're going for here. So something like this may work. But I think we can find something better. Maybe let's throw in it. And when it comes to bass, oftentimes what you can do is just use the tonics. And the tonics are the first note of every chord. So in our case, the first note in a D chord is a D. And we'll just drag that out for a whole note. And then I believe our second chord was an F sharp minor. And then we had an E and then a C sharp, I think. And we're just going to start with whole notes for now. But we can always change this later if we want to, if we feel like it needs some more movement or more whatever. All right, so I feel like that's kind of working pretty well. We can keep searching if we want and find something that might be even better than this. But for time purposes, I don't want to get, I don't want to spend an exorbitant amount of time looking for the perfect sounds right now. I'm just trying to give you some examples of how you can of what this process might look like, right? One thing I think that is happening, though, if we look at this bass, is that this attack is maybe a little too long, so let's bring that down some. And then one other thing I might want to do is do a bit, we'll sync it, but I think I'd like to do a little bit of volume sync here, but subtly. All right, so very subtle, and I went to a quarter note just to give a little bit of extra movement to the bass. Nothing crazy, but just to give it a little bit more vibe. You may not even be able to hear it without. It's very, very subtle, but the volume is dipping a little bit every quarter note. And if we... Maybe turn it down just a little bit more. Okay. And so we're filling this out a little bit. Now, one thing that you can do when you're putting these songs together is work on things like arrangement. And arrangement is kind of like when things are happening and when they're not happening. So, for instance, maybe when the song is first starting, and this is kind of arbitrary, you can play with this as well, but we don't want the bass to happen right away. And maybe we don't even want this hi-hatty stuff happening right away. Maybe we just want this pad and this kick snare pattern. Okay. And maybe we don't even want it happening for a little bit. And we can find other instruments to kind of pull in or pull out here. And at the beginning, maybe we don't even want this, that big kind of thing happening. So we'll simplify it at the beginning here. Pull that out and pull that out. And so we're simplifying things. It's not quite as big and powerful now. We kind of want it to be quieter. And we'll just copy paste this beginning one a little bit. All right. And so if we want to leave this kind of the same thing over and over again, well, maybe this is our verse, which is quiet and chill. And then this is our chorus, which is a little bit more loud and upbeat. And then when we get to our second verse, we can have it quiet down again. But maybe instead this time we have just the hi-hats going on, just to make our verses and our choruses a little bit different from each other. And the more elements you kind of add to this song, the more options you have to play with. For right now, we only have a kick and a snare, a hi-hat, a bass, and a little chordy paddy thing going on, right? But if we have other tracks that we can play with, maybe extra sounds, things that are doing different things, like you can even separate out your kick and your snare tracks, which is probably something you'd end up doing anyways when it came to mixing. It'll give you more options to kind of play with the arrangement here. But if we were just kind of listening from the, granted, very short song as it is, we have a 8-bar verse, an 8-bar chorus, another 8-bar verse, and an 8-bar chorus, and then our song is done at this point. It doesn't have to be done, but it's about a minute-long song, so as it is. But this is just sort of as a reference of something you can do. You can expand this out. You can make this verse longer, the chorus longer. Like there, I'm just trying to give you some examples of how you can go about making a song using what we kind of covered here, right? Okay, and then one thing that we can do now is just for example. Now, right now, we're at this, we've found our inspiration, we've laid down a bit of the foundation, and we're now just starting to kind of figure out our template here, right? And this is very basic, very simplified version of what might actually happen in a full production. I'm just trying to kind of very quickly go through some of these steps you might take in order to do this. So now we've gone, we have a verse, a chorus, second verse, and a second chorus. Now maybe we want to have a bridge. And on the bridge, we want things to, because we only have 4 instruments, we kind of need to start, or really 3, really, if you count all the drums together as 1. Now we need to figure out a way to make this bridge a little bit different. So what we can do is, first of all, change our chord progression, right? So we were doing a 4, 6, 5, 3. Maybe now we can do a what would be a good one? Maybe a 6, 3, 6, 3, 6, 3, or maybe a 1, 3 might be fun here. So the 1 is an A, and using our thing before, we can find out that an A major chord is an A, a C sharp, and an E. And let's double this. And then we're going to go to our C sharp, which is right here. And maybe have that happen twice. And then we will bring back in our chorus. All right. So just as a reference, I'll play it kind of as it is, and then we can sort of maybe also change up what the drums are doing and what the pad, obviously, or the bass is doing, all that kind of stuff. Okay. And so maybe for our bridge section, we can sort of just change up the whole vibe of the drums. So instead of doing eighth notes, maybe what we can do then is do some quarter notes. And then let's turn these down a bit. Oop. Didn't mean to close out of that. All right, and so we've changed up our hi-hat pattern. And maybe simplify this a little bit. We don't even have to use this element, I just think it might be fun. So I think that's right. And now we're just kind of playing a little bit with the thing. And all we're doing is just making this a little bit more... is it up here? we'll just have that repeat. And again, we're just trying to make the bridge section a little bit different. And you can do this between verses and choruses as well. I'm just trying to give you some very quick and dirty examples of how we might go about and just for fun, we may give this bass movement here. So we have an A, and then an E is also in an A, and we're using it as a transition chord to get to the C sharp minor, which also has an E in it, in the chord, C sharp minor. And so we're using that as a transition back to our A. It's very simple. You can get more complicated with this. You can use more interesting approach if you wanted to. I'm keeping this simple, really just so that we can get kind of through this quick, but also give you some examples of how you can go about doing this. So let's go ahead and just listen to our whole minute and a half long song. We've got a verse, a chorus, a second verse, a chorus, a bridge, and then we end it with a chorus. And again, like this is arbitrary. You can obviously all of this can be longer. You can make this verse much longer. You can have this second verse be longer. Like all of this, I'm just really trying to give you a quick example of what you can do in a song. And we have our everything kind of a little bit different as the song is going. Our choruses are remaining pretty much the same, but you can also change those a little bit from chorus to chorus if you want as well. But this is a very basic concept of how you can put together a song, and then all you need to do to make this an actual song is flesh it out a little bit, add in some detail, expand it maybe a little bit so that it's not just, a minute and a half long, unless that's what you're going for. But here you go. Okay. And like I said, there are lots of things that we can do to this song to make it more interesting. For instance, we can add a melody to that, and that melody can be in the form of some lyrics and a singer, or it can be in the form of an instrument playing any of these notes in the song as it's going in various rhythmic in various rhythms, whether that's like, you know, a combination of whole notes, half notes, eighth notes, quarter notes, all the rest, right? So there's a lot that we can still do with this song, but I wanted to just kind of give you an example of how you can kind of use this songwriting process, some of the theory that we've used, some of the concepts of MIDI and rhythmic stuff. And then what we can also do is add in a little bit of our EQ and compression to really make some of this come alive a little bit more, right? And so what we can start to do, let's peak dip, is we'll take our EQ, and for this song, we're gonna add a little bit of top end, a little bit of low end, to make the kick and the snare pop a bit more. So this is without it. And this is with it. All right. And then maybe add just a touch of compression as well in order to get it to have a bit more punch, more pizzazz to it. So we're going to do a relatively slow attack and a fast release, just to get some excitement out of it. So this is without anything on there, no EQ, no compression. And then here's with EQ and compression. It just comes alive a little bit. We're gonna do the a little bit of EQ on our hi-hat here, and we're just gonna very simply throw a high pass and a bit of a shelving EQ on this. So this is without it. And this is with it. All right. And then on our bass, we're gonna throw a bit of compression on there. We don't need a lot because it's distorted, and the distortion is already kind of adding a bit of that compression to it. So we don't need to go overboard with it, but we just kind of want to maybe keep it a little bit more present, I guess. And we could also use our EQ here as well. And this would, if we wanted to brighten it up, maybe have a little bit more of that distortion come through. And this is kind of arbitrary, what I'm doing here. I'm just kind of showing you how you can start to apply some of these other processes we've talked about, throughout this video series. And then on our pad here, we're probably going to high pass it a little bit just to get it out of the realm of the bass and let the bass kind of cover this low end information. It's already kind of a darker thing, meaning like it's not very bright, and I don't think we want it to be very bright. So really, all we're gonna do for this is just get it, remove some of the low end information that might be conflicting with the bass a little bit. Okay. So if we take everything off, all the EQ and compression that we've done, here's what this sounds like. And I'll just play this chorus section so that you can hear all the instruments together. And then turn it on. It's a subtle difference, but it is kind of starting to, come together a little bit. And so we can use these tools that we have at our disposal to sort of shape the sounds and make it sound kind of like more in line with what we want it to do. And if we had more instrumentation, like I said, we could, take this process even further. Maybe there's something we want to add some chorus to, or something we want to add some distortion to, or what have you. I mean, like this bass already has a bit of distortion built into it. But that's largely from the waves that it's using, the oscillators and things like that. That's giving it that characteristic. And that distortion is just adding harmonics. And if you remember what we talked about before, waveforms are essentially harmonics, right? You have the fundamental, and then you have the upper order harmonics, and that's kind of, the more harmonics you add, the more distortion you get, which is why saws sound so distorted and sine waves sound so clean and pure. And I guess what we can do real quickly, just for fun, is just add one more synthesizer here and see if we can find maybe some kind of a lead thing here. Turn it way down. Sorry about that. And we're looking for something soft. So maybe something like that could be cool. I don't know. I'm just looking for something soft to add in for kind of maybe a melody line here. And again, if we know our A major scale, we know all the notes that can be used in this progression, and it will sound all right. And so we'll bring up our piano roll here. And we'll put the melody maybe up a little bit. And this is arbitrary. I'm going to try and do this quick, so this may not be the best melody you've ever heard in your life. But the idea is you want to vary up the rhythms and the notes for the most part in order to make a melody that works, right? It's rhythm and notes. That's not right. like I said, not the best. Okay, so these are all notes that belong in the scale, and I'm kind of, here's a half note, a quarter note, a whole note, some more quarter notes, and I'm trying to vary up the notes and the rhythm as it's being played, and I'm not supremely happy with this right now. I'm just really trying to give you guys some examples of how you can do this, right? And so our first chord being a D. Well, what notes are we playing? We're playing an A, which is, and the chords in a D major chord are D, F sharp, and A. Well, we're playing an A, an F sharp, and a D. So this is a D major chord, right? We're just using all the same notes that belong in that chord. And then, excuse me. And then we're playing a whole note on A. Well, in an F sharp minor, the notes are F sharp, A, and C sharp. Right, so we're just using the chord, the notes that are within the chord right now. You don't have to, but that's kind of what this has ended up being. And then we have this run of notes here, right? This is the E major chord here, and we're starting on a B. The notes in an E major are E, G sharp, and B. So we have the G sharp, or the B here. Then we have an A, and then this is a G sharp, and this is an F sharp. So we're just kind of running a scale back down to this E, and the last chord is a C sharp minor, which has a C sharp, an E, and a G sharp in it. So again, we're ending on here. So the only two notes that don't actually belong in any of these chords that's being played while it's being played is this A and this F sharp. Everything else fits in the chord structure of the, or fits the notes that belong in the chord. That's not saying you have to do it that way, but I'm pointing that out. And this is kind of how you go about writing a melody. And you play with this, right? If you don't like this little descending scale here, you change it. But I'm just trying to give you a very basic example of how you can kind of go about adding a melody maybe into this song. And maybe that's just a little too high pitched. Maybe we do want to bring this down, soften it up a little bit. And then the second time through, you can change the melody a little bit more, so it doesn't have to. You can do something as simple as this, copy and paste it, and there's your melody. But you don't have to. You can make the second half be a little bit different, kind of like a call and then a response, as opposed to just repeating over and over again, which is probably what I would do in this case. Okay. And so that's an example of kind of maybe a melody you could use for this particular thing. There are a bajillion different ways that you can go about doing this, different melodies, but I'm trying to change the pitch and the rhythm and make it a little bit different as it's going and not be completely the same. And then you can have this repeat if you want, or change it up. Being a chorus, I would probably recommend changing it up so that it's not the same as this. And that, again, you're giving it some movement. And then the second verse, you can bring back this melody, perhaps. And then another thing you can do is play with the octave. So maybe during the chorus, you have it kind of a lower sort of a vibe. And then once we get to our chorus, we have kind of a jump. Okay. So again, I would probably spend more time on this if I was really, really trying to make this a banger, so to speak. But this is a very simple kind of a thing. Let me see if we can maybe find something that's just a little cooler than this. so you can play with it, and you can like, try different things out, experiment. The whole point is, you can play with this and make it, change it if you don't like it, keep it if you do like it. But yeah, hopefully this has all been helpful. We're trying to put this all into practice. This is a very basic kind of production. Obviously, if you were, you could spend more time on this and really flesh it out, fill in the details, and maybe we'll do a video in the future that is designed to do kind of more of that thing, is flesh out some of the detail on this type of production. But I think I want to get a few more of these basic examples out of the way before we go into that, so you can really understand and maybe play with some different types of feels and rhythms and tempos and all sorts of stuff, so that you can kind of get an idea. But essentially, we're just using the knowledge we've gained through our theory, our sound design, our effects like compression, EQ, to come together and put together a very basic song. But you can take this kind of basic concept and expand on it, and we'll get more into that in the future. But I want to go over some of these examples so that you can really see how knowing some of this stuff, while it can't tell you how to write a song, it can give you some of the building blocks on how to start the process, and then you can use this sort of formula or this process, in order to start putting together your own music. All right. And remember, as I'm going through this, I'm always asking myself, does this sound good to me? And if it does, I keep going. If not, I change something. I'm not afraid to just delete everything and start over if I'm really not feeling it at the end of the day. And you probably want to have that same mindset, or be willing to maybe like, I really liked this sound when I was first starting, but now it really it doesn't seem to fit the rest of the song. So I can change that sound, or maybe change what that sound is doing. There are lots of ways you can go about kind of doing this. And so we're going to kind of, for the next few weeks, we're going to do more of this type of thing, where we're going to go over how to do the production. And I'm going to do my best to explain not only how to put this stuff together, but also what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, right? Why I'm choosing the chords I'm choosing, or why I'm choosing the notes I'm choosing, or why I'm putting the snare or the kick or the hi-hat in those places, so that you kind of understand that you can, that thinking, and start to apply it to your own productions and get a better understanding of how you're doing this, right? So anyways, I hope this has all been helpful. I hope that you are now able to take some of these concepts and apply them to your own productions and songwriting, and create some wonderful masterpieces of your own. If you guys have any questions or anything you want me to get into more detail about, please let me know in the comments. My goal with this whole video series is to help people that are just getting into production, and maybe even people that have been doing it for a while, to sort of take their stuff to the next level and be able to create the things that they want to create. And I want to be able to facilitate that in the best way I can. So please let me know if you have any questions or any other topics or anything that you want to dig deeper into in the comments, and I'll be happy to respond to those. With that, I hope you have yourselves a wonderful week, a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.